We have with us today a very special guest. We have with us Salt Lake County Sheriff Rosie Rivera, and we're just excited that she's able to have the time to join us in this conversation. And again, the AYAP program stands for Latina Leaders Advancing. So it's also with an entrepreneurship bent, of course. Everyone is welcome to this broadcast. We don't mind in terms of whether you have a business or not, whatever your gender happens to be. This is something to share, and mostly these are examples of leadership, and also from women in our community who are in key positions and have a level of success. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and make sure that I give a great introduction here to Sheriff Rosie Rivera, who I have known for several years and I have admired for several years. And we know that you're a very busy person, considering the events that occurred this past weekend and this week, and that you have your hands full. In fact, as I was mentioning to you before we went live, I did catch you where you were giving out water and on the front lines on Saturday, and that must have been just to me an example of leadership, to be there in the front lines, basically being exposed to the same thing your team is exposed to. So and one of the things that I want to say is that somebody who's a Latina and a sheriff, no less, and they have achieved this. Your story is very compelling, and to me, it is an example worthy of being able to hear from you, because this has been, like I said, quite the journey for you.
It has, and thank you for having me today. I think it's important for us to have conversations about women in leadership, and I appreciate that. And it has been a challenging week. You know that law enforcement is challenging already, but when you add things that happen over the weekend, that just increases the challenge. Being a female in law enforcement is a challenge as well, and I'm also a minority. So I've been dealing with challenges for a very long time, but I'm happy to be here.
Well, thank you so much. And as you touched upon, being a woman is already difficult in law enforcement, and this is something that we're going to ask you to touch upon, where you started, what made you decide to go into law enforcement in the first place, and how did you juggle family life also with your career?
Okay, well, about 7 years old, I knew I wanted to be a police officer. I used to watch shows about police, and my dad used to want me to be an attorney, and he'd make me watch the shows with the attorneys. And we used to have those conversations early on. And then when I was about 14 years old, we had an incident with all of my family going camping. And there was an incident where one of the folks that were nearby, neighbors camping, got into some trouble and wouldn't follow the rules. The sheriff's office showed up out there. And instead of addressing the issue, they threw us all out. And I remember asking my dad, this isn't fair, and why aren't you speaking up? And he told me he couldn't, or they would take him to jail for nothing. So at that time, I knew there was a problem, and that reinforced me wanting to be a police officer. And, now today I can say I'm a police officer, and now I'm the sheriff.
That is awesome. Well, as you can see, Rosie, we have Sheriff Rivera. I'm sorry, I'm going to make sure that I am addressing you. But we have with us our Executive Director of the Suazo Business Center, Sylvia Castro, joining us. And we just want to make sure that she can say hello to us and join in this conversation with quite a powerhouse, the Sheriff of Salt Lake County, Rosie Rivera.
And I just want to say thank you, Sheriff Rivera, for being with us today. It's definitely an interesting time. We actually had booked about 4 months ago, but I'm glad that things kind of worked out the way they did, because I think leadership is a huge thing right now, and especially when it comes to law enforcement, there's always that fear. And I think being a woman of color kind of has to prepare you quite a bit for this role, and we're looking forward to, frankly, learning a lot from you and learning a lot from what you have learned along the way. And thank you for being here.
Thanks.
Sheriff Rivera, and you said this was, to me, was interesting that your father didn't say anything to make sure that he wasn't taken, he wasn't arrested, because imagine being there with with the children and the family and whatnot. So so then you said there that, wow, something is not right, but still, to me, it's interesting that you decided to continue wanting to be a police officer.
Yes, and I did that because when I asked my father why he didn't do anything and what can we do, he said, you can make a difference. And he kept pushing that if you want change, you need to get involved and you need to become part of that change. And so from early on, I knew that. And so I wanted to pursue a career in law enforcement. And then I got pregnant at the age of 14. And I became a young mother at the age of 15. So my career plans were put on hold to raise a family. I had to work in the onion fields so we could have food. Just to, I was too young to get a job. So I went with my in-laws who were migrant workers and had to work the fields. And that's how I survived for a very long time until I was old enough to get a job. And then I worked in various different jobs, but with always the dream that someday I want to go to the police academy. Someday I want to be a cop. And when I was 31 years old, I was married at the time. And my husband said, do it. And my dad had been pushing me, and so I did. I was 31 years old when I went through the police academy, and it's been great ever since. It's been a challenge, though. When I first started, there was only 9 women in the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office. We have about 100 now, so that's quite a big difference. But we still have a long ways to go. And when it comes to diversity, we have a long ways to go. The Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office, we've done a lot in 3 years. We're about 27% with diversity when it comes to minorities of hiring. That's pretty high. Our unified police department, though, we still have a lot of work. We're only at 13%.
Wow. And this is interesting. So you said that at 31, with the support of your husband at the time, you went ahead and went into the police academy. Did you start off at the sheriff's office? Where did you start? Where was your first police job, so to speak?
Well, I went to the police academy at Weber State College, and I got picked up by Weber State College Police Department. So I worked there for 1 year. And then I got hired by Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office. And that was back in I started in 1993, and then 94 got hired by the Sheriff's Office.
Wow. So you're quite the veteran of Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office.
Yes.
You know this.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, throughout the years, I have seen several awards go to you because you have been one of the highest ranking, if not the highest ranking, law enforcement officer, female, and let alone somebody who is also an ethnic minority.
Yes. Yes, I have received many awards. It's been nice to receive those, but I really hope that people pay attention that minorities, when we take leadership positions, that it's okay to say, I got that award and I'm earning that award, because if we can continue to do that, we work harder and people will follow us. And that's what my goal is that I can be that role model for others, and they know that they can come and do the same profession and become a leader in the organization, especially in a male-dominated organization. I know how tough it is. And we just have to be those role models, especially if you're at the top.
That's, you are so right. We cannot emulate what we don't see modeled before us. And that's so important to be able to have women in positions such as yours. Not only that, but also ethnic minorities. And it's not easy because in my experience, and I came through corporate, which nowhere near law enforcement, but I had to work like 3 or 4 times as hard as any of my counterparts. And I think, Sylvia, that's probably has been your experience.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, and we just kind of keep going because we have to, we have this goal in mind. And I had no idea you actually started at 31. I mean, frankly, that's impressive to know. I know you have been in law enforcement for a while. And especially, and you had to have your baby. There was some setbacks along the way. What kept you going, especially to continue in this field? Law enforcement is hard, and to start at 31, what was the motivation behind it? What kept you going?
What kept me going and keeps me going is that I know I can make change, and my father told me that early. If you want to make change, you have to get involved and do something. And so that kept me, going. And I know I'm making a difference. And it's not just about changing, seeing women in leadership. The change I wanted to see was that law enforcement can still interact with the public and still keep law and order. And I felt like I could do that, and I could contribute to that, and change the culture of law enforcement, that we work closer with our communities, we get to know our communities, and we become as diverse as our communities.
That is just key. And, and the thing is that many people think that, okay, so I started right out of college, at the age of 20 and that sort of thing. But you already had a little family going. I don't know how many children did you have at this time? I am curious because many of our women have, are balancing children, a business, or a leadership position.
Yeah, I had 3 kids at the time, and that's all I have is 3 children. They're all adults now. I have 6 grandchildren now. But yeah, I went to the police academy, and I worked full time while I attended the academy. And, a sad part of that was my mother was diagnosed with cancer during that time. So I would go to work, then to the academy, and then to the hospital, and spend as much time as I could with her. And then just repeated that through the entire academy. And she eventually died of cancer, but she made my graduation, and that was important. So yeah, it was tough. And it still is. I've raised my kids for the most part being single, because I ended up getting a divorce. Law enforcement is really tough on marriages, but also the fact that I got married at 14, and we both grew up and grew separate ways. We stayed friends, and we still are great friends. But it was a challenge to do the job being a single mom and trying to juggle different shifts. Police don't get paid a whole lot, so I had to work different part-time jobs. But my kids came out okay. And one of the things that I would recommend to anyone that has children is to encourage them for education. It took me a long time. I didn't graduate high school. I got my GED when I was 26 years old. And I now have a college degree, and all my kids have college degrees, because that's how you can make progress, is through education. We have to be educated and to keep up. And, I have a son who's a firefighter. I have a son who just retired from the United States Air Force. And then I have a daughter who has 2 degrees in criminal justice and paralegal studies. And she's a stay-at-home mom, but that's okay, because she has a degree. She has something to fall back on, and she'll never have to depend on anyone. But right now she just wants to raise her baby, and it all works. It's a whole variety.
And that's also, yes, about to speaking about diversity. But look, I mean, this is interesting because of the many reasons that I hear from people not starting an endeavor. Sometimes it is, but I have 3 kids, I'm a single mother, I'm working 2 jobs, I've got a sick parent. Many of us have to juggle now, in our cases, with parents who are aging, and also, the demands of a career, or working in a community. I can't imagine how hard that must have been to raise children, and the fact that you also saw them go through college and be able to achieve also along the way more positions of responsibility. So I've been curious about this. What was your first supervisor type of position? When did that come?
I was in law enforcement for 5 years, and then I knew early that the only way to become a supervisor in law enforcement is you had to have a degree, or you have to wait a long time to test. And we have to test for our positions. And so I went out and got a degree. When I started law enforcement at Weber State, they offered free tuition. And then when I moved to the sheriff's office, they helped pay for tuition as well. So I got a bachelor's degree, was able to test in 5 years. And I was an older person, so a little bit more mature. And I think that did help because I'd been raising a family. I already knew a lot of, what it takes to be a leader. So I was successful there. And then I've worked my way up through the ranks, through lieutenant, and I was a chief out in Riverton City for quite a while too. And then I decided to run for sheriff, and now I'm the sheriff.
There we go. I love it. I mean, this is interesting. In fact, a couple of years ago, I ran into you of all places in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
on the street. And I'm thinking, wow, it's like, of course, I didn't say sheriff. I just said, Rosie, fancy you being here. Apparently there was a big meeting of, I don't know if it was law enforcement or sheriffs around the country. But what's interesting is that you are not the garden variety of sheriff. And in fact, I want you to speak to us about, in terms nationally speaking, what makes Sheriff Rivera unique.
I think being unique came with being a minority and a woman, because it is a male-dominated field. And when you look across the country, there were only 2 Latinas sheriffs in the country. And then the sheriff that was the very first female Hispanic sheriff, she ended up leaving to run for governor. So that left me as the only one. And I'm hoping more will run and try to get in those positions. But I can tell you, in the state of Utah, all the sheriffs all 29 sheriffs have all been white men. And when I became the sheriff, I am the only female sheriff ever in the state, and the only female minority sheriff in the state. I had some concerns. And I thought, how am I going to fit into this group of white men? And I'm telling you that from day one, they have been the most supportive people. They told me, you now have 28 big brothers, and they really show that. And then when I saw you in DC, I was meeting the major county sheriffs, and they were really happy to see a female sheriff come to the meeting, because for years and years, there's been very few. And they have asked me to participate in multiple committees because they want that diversity. And they're not just asking me to say we have somebody. They are asking me for my input. And that's what's important, because throughout my career, I've been put on diversity boards over and over. And what they do is they put you on the board with other minorities. Well, we already know what the issues are. We're not the problem, right? Well, with the sheriffs, they bring everybody together, and they truly do look at me for advice. and input, and I am treated fairly. And that was surprising to me because I didn't think that would happen, but it did. And I thought about it, and I think a lot of it has to do with the way I conduct myself. I walk into the room, and my father taught me this early on, never feel less than anyone. And so I walk into that room knowing I am the sheriff of Salt Lake County, and I count too. And I think that matters because I've mentored many, many women, and the lack of confidence is what is challenging for them. So I try to build confidence in women by mentoring them to say, when you walk in that room, you're just as important as anybody else in that room.
That is awesome because, again, one of the things what we've noticed when working with female entrepreneurs is that sometimes, and some of them are in male-dominated areas like construction. And I have had someone said, I should change the name of my company so that it reflects something more masculine. And then I say, and in fact, I brought you up in this conversation. This actually happened about before we went into quarantine. And I said to this person, I said, there's a few male-dominated positions, professions, businesses. I said, but the fact that you're a woman, and the fact that you're Hispana, it can be an asset. And I said, look at Salt Lake County Sheriff Rosie Rivera. I said, this is a person who, and at the time I recalled that you had been only one of two in the country, but people listen to you because you have throughout your career, what I have seen, and I know that you're a very humble person. In fact, Sylvia and I were commenting on this, a few days ago. It says, Rosie is one of the most humble people considering her accomplishments that we know. But it is a person that is humble, but at the same time, somebody that is confident that they're who they are. So I have brought you up as that, Sylvia.
No, and actually, that's one of the things. There's a certain quiet. You're not what I would expect, and because what's interesting is the sheriff position is an elected position.
Yeah.
And I remember when you first run for it, you have never been a politician. You've been always about doing the right thing and serving. And that's one of the things that have always struck me about you. You kind of have this quiet confidence about you. But how did you get that? And I know I think we have a couple of questions. So my last question is, what allowed you, how did you grow that confidence to be in the room and basically be and saying, I'm important too?
I think that started early with my father giving me that confidence to tell me I can do anything I want to do. I can be anybody I want to be. I just have to work hard and never forget where I came from. And that started when I was very, very young. And that's what I try and when I'm mentoring women, I said, you may have not heard that your whole life, but you can start now and know that. And I think it's been helpful for other women to hear that because it's important that we all stand together and work together and build each other up instead of tearing each other down.
And we have a question here from Launa LB that says, what is your position on red flag laws?
I haven't really taken a position because of the position I'm in law enforcement. So it's a challenge when you're in law enforcement and you're asked to take a certain position because I have to look at all sides. And that's where I am right now with that. It's a tough one.
And frankly, what we want to showcase here is also the fact that, of leadership and inspiration, if you would. There's another comment here and says, this is from Kimberly Ann Norland. And she says, Sheriff Rivera does so much for the community, a true inspiration and very well respected. And then we have another question here from Roberto Maturana. And Roberto asks, we need more Rosie Riveras in our community, but what can we do?
What you can do is apply for a law enforcement position. We're always trying to increase our diversity. We changed the law last year so we could hire at 19 because we weren't getting people to apply. And, we need good law enforcement out there. And the more variety that we get of people with different backgrounds, different, very diverse people who look like our community, that's how you make the change. And we're doing that in our jail right now. Our jail population is very diverse, and so are our officers that work in there, and it's working very well. And that's, I would just encourage you to come into the profession. We need more police officers of color, and it's a challenge to try to recruit. If you look at what we're doing on the Salt Lake County Sheriff's recruiting, if you look at the flyers we put out, the bus pictures, we're diverse. We're showing that you can look like us and get hired, and it's working. We were down 100 deputies over a year ago, and we're less than 20 now. So big difference. And 27% is minorities.
Oh, that's a huge improvement.
Yeah, it is. So, yeah.
So quick question. So let's say that we do not go to we're not part of law enforcement. What can we do when we are not law enforcement? What can we do, I guess, in terms of making some of those changes?
You can get involved in law enforcement. You don't have to be a police officer. We have civilians who work for us, and you don't have to work for us. We have citizens advisory boards. We have our cadet program. Or you can just be somebody actively in your community, get involved by running for office. One thing I can tell you right now, the issue that we have especially me being a minority in an elected position, we have to encourage people to go out and vote, because I can tell you that there are people out there that do not like the fact that there is a female Hispanic sheriff. And the only way I can keep that is if people go out and vote, because not everybody wants to hear me say racism exists in our communities. When I say that makes some folks angry, but it does. And I'm not going to lie about it. I've seen it myself. I've experienced it myself, and we can make changes. But people have to get out and vote to make those differences. That's so important.
Thank you. And that's something that many people say that they don't want to be involved in politics because politics this, politics that. But truly, in order to make a change, we have to make sure that we have representation, people that look like us, and that we are at the table. You're a great example of having that voice at the table.
Thank you.
Well, and I think it's interesting because when people think of politics, they usually think of national politics. But what affects them day to day is the local politics. It's what's happening at the city, in their city, in their county. And those are usually, I guess, they're not as sexy as what's going on. They're not as loud, probably. But that involvement is key. And I think you're one of the very, very few elected at this kind of local level.
I think I dropped you call for, or you went unclear. I didn't
Sorry.
hear.
No, so I was saying that I think you're one of the very few local elected individuals, but you're definitely, is there any other people in law enforcement that are women in the state?
That are women?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we have women in law enforcement. Actually, we have quite a few now. There's only one other female police chief in this county, but there is no other sheriffs that are female. So I'm the only sheriff. But yeah, there are females. They're not elected, though. They're not elected. The only elected position is the sheriff.
The sheriff. But there's only another female police chief.
Yeah, and that's West Valley's police chief, Colleen Jacobs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's all we have. And, you know, working up the ranks in law enforcement, there's not a lot of women even close to making it to chief because you have to earn each rank. And a lot of them, it's tough. You're trying to support your family and work different shifts and go to school and try to figure out how you're, you know, if you're a supervisor, they send you to night shift right away. Those are challenging. And so we don't see a lot of women apply for promotional. What I have done in the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office is I've appointed women in my command. So I have a diverse command. And I have 2 women chiefs. So that helps. But those are appointed positions. So, but they are law enforcement officers, and that's for the jail.
Wow. I don't think that many people realize how many barriers there are. But I think it also speaks to you as a leader that even though there were this many, I mean, you had so many roadblocks. Every single roadblock I could ever even think of. And you just went through and you just pushed through and you just pushed through. And frankly, it doesn't matter, you know, whether or not you're in public safety or another department. I think that really it speaks to all of us in so many different levels to actually see somebody that pushed through and got through.
You know,
Go ahead.
no, I was just going to echo what Sylvia was saying, that according to risk factors, I mean, you had several there present, and on top of that, in a male-dominated, career, and so there we have it.
Yeah. And I still have barriers. I do. When, you know, in my position, I am a voice now and I want to be heard and I feel like I should be heard. But I get shut down all the time. I just got shut down in a meeting before this, talking about how we need to change law enforcement because not everybody agrees. And I do. I think we do need to make those changes. Otherwise, we're going to continue to go through what we're going through right now. And you know what happened in Minnesota? No, I don't know any officer that thinks that's okay, you know, to murder a person. But I also know that 850,000 officers across the country are paying the price for that officer and those others that participated. So we have to figure out how do we make that change. But it's a challenge for me now because not everybody wants to see change and not everybody wants to see minorities in charge or at the table. And it's up to us to put ourselves there. It's hard and it's still hard for me, but I'm going to continue to do what I can. When you look at the state legislature, they're predominantly white. I'm able to work very well with many of them. But I had a conversation with one last night, and they just said, you know, we're not like the rest of the country here in Utah. We don't have those kind of racist issues. And I had to stop them and say, yes, we do.
Yeah,
That's
we do.
the problem. We do. And I got invited to help write legislation on how to change law enforcement, and I'm happy to do it.
I mean, that's part of it. To me, it's part of the change is admitting there's a problem.
Absolutely.
And it's, I think we all agree we can all see it, that it's a problem. And unfortunately, there's good and there's bad. And when the bad is not filtered out, everybody else pays, which is not just police officers pay, the community pay, everyone pays.
Right, everybody does.
But I have heard that say before that, you know, there's no racism in Utah. I try not to. I wish that was true. It happens everywhere.
Too.
It's not overt, and I think mainly, but I think again, it's frankly just realizing there's an issue and let's work together to figure it out.
Right, right. And you know, I know it exists and I admit that it exists. And I also know that in law enforcement, we can make changes, but it's challenging. There's barriers there. And we just need more people to get involved and, help push those changes. Now, some of the changes that are being recommended are just absurd to me. I have to keep myself safe too. You saw what happened on Saturday at the protests.
Yes.
There
Yes.
were suggestions that law enforcement should not have the tools to do the job, that law enforcement should not have the equipment. But I'm telling you, when you have officers that had, one of ours from UPD was hit with the axe, other one was hit with a hammer. We had one hit with a brick. You have to have a helmet on. Salt Lake City officer hit with a bat in the back of the head. He could have been critically injured. So, there's a balance, but I have to show both. I have to explain why I need the tools to do my job and stay safe and protect the public. Because if I go down, you're not protected. So I have to do that. But on the other hand, I have to say racism still exists in the state of Utah. It might not be like other states, but we can always make changes and make it better. But for law enforcement, for me being in law enforcement and a minority, it's a challenge, and it's hard. I'm right in the middle of both.
Right. I was kind of, I don't know if it was, I was impressed that you were there, because I know there was so much going on over the weekend, but I think you're the only leader I actually saw on the street.
Well, there were two of us there. The other one was West Valley Police Chief Colleen Jacobs.
The women.
Two women showed up to take care of their people.
Oh my gosh. I all of a sudden I'm in Channel 4 and then my husband goes, Sheriff Rivera is there handing out water. And I'm like, what? And it's like we're in the middle of what was going on, and we saw things being thrown and hurled and everything, and you're in the middle of that, where you could have actually been talking to people on Zoom.
Yeah, that's just not who I am, for one thing. But I was at our command post. I wasn't on Zoom. I wasn't at the Capitol, but we had a command post where we were staging all of our law enforcement and deploying them out. And over the radio, I heard, officers do not have water. We have several who are being dehydrated. It was hot. Our equipment's hot. The vests are hot. And that's when myself and my chief, we got in a vehicle, loaded it up, and took water. And then I ended up right in the middle of the chaos. But that's what you do. And that's what you do as a leader. That's what I would expect from a leader.
We have some comments here. We have Cheba. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but she did say, I'm going to apply, meaning for a position there.
Come on down.
And she also says that you have to filter out the bad. And in addition to that, she does say, the looks I got being a Black person in Utah the past few days, especially was ridiculous, she said, shaking my head.
Yeah, and it's been challenging, and for anybody of color, we just have to make sure that our responses are, we are proud of who we are. We're proud of who we are, and we don't incite violence to protect who we are, because that's what they're looking for. Is they're looking for us to get upset, us to feel less, and we just have to be proud of who we are. Over the weekend, my granddaughter, she's half Black and she's half Hispanic, and she works at a coffee shop. And there was a person there that would not let her wait on him because she's Black. She looks Black, but she is, her last name's a Hispanic last name, but she looks Black and she's half. So she has these two challenges. I'm Hispanic, I'm Black, what am I? And then she has the discrimination that. And I was very upset because Saturday I was there trying to, deal with the protests and understand, why the protests and what the message was. And the message wasn't being heard because of all the vandalism that was going on, the criminal activity. But at the same time, on Sunday, I'm hearing from her asking me, what am I supposed to do? He wouldn't let me wait on him. He wanted somebody else because I'm Black. How do you explain that to someone that's 22 years old? And what I said to her is, you be proud of who you are and you defend that. And there's ways to do it. There's intelligent ways to have a response, and get involved. I asked her, are you registered to vote? No. Well, why are you not registered? You better be, because I'm running too in 2 years. But that's how you make the difference. You change who is in charge.
I have been observing again about that a lot of folks, when go to these protest marches and things like that, and you ask, have you been registered to vote? 3/4 of them will tell you that they have not. And and no one is saying you don't have the right to assemble or protest, but at the same time, if you want to actually have representation, voting for individuals that will have a voice for you is important, and that's something that you have done. And in the spaces where you occupy, as you were saying, and even though it's been tough, do you have any words of advice? And again, I know that we've asked this in different ways, but I think it bears repeating, if you would, especially if people have just tuned in to our broadcast. And just what would you say to people in order to be that change?
I would say, number one, never forget where you came from. Be proud of who you are. We are part of this nation. And we have to get involved. We have to have confidence in ourselves, but we also have to stand by each other. When I say get out and vote, what I'm talking about is there are several of people of color who are running for office. We can't win if you don't help us, because there are people that do not want women and minorities in those leadership positions and in charge or in those political positions. But we have to change it. If we want to change what is going on in this nation, we have to change the culture. And by changing the culture, part of it is changing who's running the show, basically.
So then it's not just voting, you're saying also run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, run for office. Put yourself out there. It's not easy. It's hard. When I first ran, I didn't even think of running for sheriff. My goal had always been be a police chief, make a difference. That's all I ever heard, and all I ever saw were white sheriffs, white male sheriffs. I've never even thought of it. And then when the previous sheriff quit, I had Jim Gonzalez call me and say, why are you not running? I never even thought of that. Well, guess what? He helped me get in my head, well, you could. And he was right. And that's what we need, is we need to encourage each other to run for office and pick an office that you know that you can make a good difference. And, our city councils, they need to be diverse. Our legislator, look at the demographics there. Minorities are a very small population on who decides what happens in this state.
This is true, and it's interesting because I've been meaning to ask you, how it was that you decided to run, and I'm glad that Jim got into your head. We all know Jim, and yeah. He's something else. So a shout out to him if you're watching, Jim. And but here's another thing too. Another thing too that can be done is contributing to campaigns.
Yes.
Campaigns. Tell me, are campaigns cheap?
They're not cheap, especially the district attorney's race and the Salt Lake County Sheriff's race are probably the two that cost a lot of money for the local. You need over $200,000 easy to be able to run.
Wow.
I can tell you my challenge was with the Latino population, because it was hard to get people to donate. And I think it's just they don't understand how critical that piece is. fortunately, I did have Jim to help me go figure out how to raise that kind of money, because that's hard. And, I have to do that in 2 years again. And it's a challenge, but if everybody were to donate just a little tiny bit to somebody's campaign, we can make this happen, and we can change the culture of political.
I know, Sylvia, you had a comment, and so just trying not to get you off the hook there, Sylvia.
No, frankly, I don't think people understand how elections work. They understand that they have to vote, but they don't understand the inner workings of what it's like to be a candidate. Because frankly, there's no that many that have done it before. We don't know anyone. There's very few that have run for office, and that it's quite an operation, and it's hard to run. It takes not just the willingness to run, but the fundraising. And that's kind of the dirty secret of politics, is that you have to be a fundraiser to get there. And sometimes it's not about the most qualified person.
Mhm.
And with you, we're lucky. I think we're lucky in that regard. But it's hard because I think we need to do a better job too of teaching the community how it works, how you have to not either run for office or support people running from office, either by being in their campaign or by providing to them financially. And I think we do have a question about military style weapons. And I think this is one of the military style weapons being needed. Can we move to less fatal weapons?
Okay, so this is a challenge for me. So, law enforcement, we need the tools to keep us safe, to keep you safe. I know that everybody, not everybody, but there are people who see a big, what we call the Bearcat. It looks like a military vehicle. That vehicle has helped us when things go bad and an officer goes down or a citizen goes down. We've used that vehicle to go into a crowd and pick that person up and get them the medical care that they need. Those vehicles are used to protect us. When we're wearing helmets and shields, on Saturday, a lot of us didn't have that equipment, and we're asking for it because with COVID, we were spit on. We had,
Oh, wow.
bricks and hit by hammers and bats, and we know the helmet helped protect the Salt Lake City officer. The helmets are going to look like a military style because you have to have something to protect. It's a balance. We don't have to overdo it, but it's interesting because the National Guard showed up and nobody complained about their vehicles, and that is a military style. That's what their role is, but law enforcement has a different role. We didn't roll in with several. We only have probably 4 in this county of those big vehicles because across the county, they're harder to drive. They don't get there very quick. So you have to have them stationed different cities and different police departments to get there in a hurry when needed. I think if people understood why we need those tools, they would understand why we have them or are going to buy them. As far as the rifles go, we need the same type of power that is used on us. And we made an arrest yesterday on an individual that had a vehicle full of firearms. If we don't have something to protect the public, that is going to put us all in danger. And we feel like, as law enforcement, that there are tools we need. We don't need to overdo it. Like the National Guard, that's their role. They roll in with several of those. We don't. We have, very few of those type of vehicles, and we are considerate of what the public sees. We do tours. We ask the public to come and look at it, and we explain why we need it. But not everybody will ever understand that, and it's a challenge. Everybody has their own opinion on that. So I did want to ask the red flag law. Who asked the question? Could you email at me or send me that information so I can have a longer conversation with them?
This was a lady by the name of, I believe, Launa LB. Is what it says here.
Yeah, so if Leona could, we'll probably reach out to her, get her contact information, and forward it to you.
Okay. Yeah, I'd
be happy to do that.
talk more about that. So.
But I know that we're winding down on the time, but any words there, because again, we find you truly inspiring, and this is such a treat to have you here. So we want to hear from you in terms of anything that you want us to know, anything that would be like great piece of advice for those who are listening.
Really quick though, before we get there was one last question in terms of military style weapons. One last question was how often, because you mentioned there's not that many, how often are they used?
So the big vehicle is used in critical incidences. So SWAT call outs, active shooters, protest type situations that have gone bad, like Saturday. Those are what they're used for. But most of the time it's used for the SWAT guys. And I don't know if everybody knows what SWAT is. SWAT are trained officers to go into situations that are very dangerous. It could be search warrants where we know that the individuals have firearms. It could be a situation where we need somebody's life is in danger and we send officers in, we roll in with that vehicle to protect them. It's an armored vehicle. We know they won't get shot at, but they're not used daily on a daily basis. Honestly, we use them more at community events to try to explain to the community what they are for.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And did you want me to talk about what Antonella asked?
Yes, please. Sorry.
Of course. I mean, this is the reason, we talked about this 4 months ago. We're making sure that we could listen from somebody as inspiring as you.
Okay. Well, what I would say is thank you for having me. I think this conversation has been really great and it's important. And I would ask that everyone do your part. Do your part to make us a community that is peaceful. I said this weekend, we want peace because we do. As law enforcement, we want peace, but so does our communities, and we need it between us. But we also need to be able to communicate with each other without getting angry. There are going to be barriers. And, I've had several hard conversations with people and they've changed my mind. And vice versa. I've been able to change the mind of other people and their opinions with just a little bit of conversation and education. And then the last thing I want to say is for women of color, let's get involved. Let's stick together. We're stronger together, and let's help mentor each other. And we can become great leaders, and we need more. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sheriff Rosie Rivera, and also any parting words from our Executive Director, Sylvia Castro.
I just want to seriously thank you so much for being with us. I think it's so important to actually understand how people get to their roles, but it's always to me important what was the journey like. Everybody sees the end result, but nobody hears about the journey, and I think it's always important to learn about it because frankly it's encouraging to learn that there were blocks along the way and you persisted. It was encouraging to hear from you that you also get shut down. I'm always getting shut down, and it's I think there's a study that talks about how often women are shut down in meetings, but we have to keep pushing back. And it's hearing from you, it makes me feel a little less lonely. That is because it can feel like it's just you.
Right.
And hearing from other people saying, oh, you're getting that too? Okay, that makes it's in a sense it's a solidarity to learn about the challenges that we all face. So I want to thank you so much. I know it's been incredibly hard to deal with all these changes, but I think the fact that you are a woman of color, you actually understand. Like you said, you're kind of caught in the middle, but it's a good thing you're caught in the middle because you see both sides and you can actually communicate to us, like you explain to us, why do they do the things they do? But at the same time, you're advocating for the change that is needed because you see there's a problem.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And again, I want to thank all of you who joined us today with this Facebook Live, this virtual AYA. We hope to have a repeat of this, and definitely our inspiring guest, Sheriff Rivera. Thank you again, and hopefully we will be able to have you back with us at another time.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.